welcome all to the Navigating School and Business as a first generation student. This is going to be an amazing session where we get to offer it, and we're going to have some of our esteemed panelists who, like many of you, have gone through their college experience as a first gen student. So as a lot of the other webinar sessions have sort of been run throughout, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the panelists a few questions. And as we sort of are conversing, if you as students have any questions, feel free to post them within the PepsiCo chat. I will congregate them and we will ask them accordingly. So without further ado, we're going to get into sort of the introductions of all of our panelists. So again, my name is Malik Patton. I go by the pronouns he, him, his. I am going to be the moderator for today. Outside of just being your lovely admissions director for the conference, I am also an analyst at BlackRock, working in our FP&A division, supporting our U.S. Wealth Advisory business. Also was a first gen student that went to the University of Pennsylvania and graduated in 2018. So from that, I am going to kick it off to Aparna.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Aparna Gomez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a senior analyst in the healthcare practice at Analysis Group, specifically Menlo Park office in California. I am a first generation student. I was also an international student. I did my undergrad at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, and I did my master's in public health at the Yale School of Public Health. I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you for sharing. Eric, do you want to give a quick intro here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric. This is Ziggy. I am an analyst at Goldman Sachs. I did O4U all 4 years of college, so it has a very special place at my heart. I spent 2 years in Goldman's office in New York in our sales and trading, now named Global Markets Division. And then about 8 months ago, I moved out to our Dubai office. So it is a little later here. It's now 9 p.m. here in the Middle East, but hello, everyone from Dubai.
Awesome, awesome. And Martel, last but not least, would you like to give us an introduction?
Good afternoon, morning, or evening for everyone. Martel French. I am a senior manager at Ernst & Young in our consulting technology risk practice, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And I am a graduate from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I studied our accounting program. And I'm really, really excited. This is my first time with the conference, so looking forward to this today.
Awesome. Thank you all for sort of giving your introductions about your backgrounds and where you come from, and just giving a little bit more insight into that. So before we really jump into the meat of the panel, I would love to just kick it off by first just defining what is a first-gen college student. It seems like I've had many conversations with people where the definition sort of differs, where first gen is maybe the first person in your family, period, to go to college. Some is where you, it's just making sure your parents aren't the ones who have gone to college. Some is just if you are, maybe your siblings or close proximity have, but not the older generations, that's a first gen. So I guess just for us and for this specific exercise, instead of just really looking at the pure definition, I would love to just dive deeper into what the first generation title implies. And for me, it's like it implies a possibility that a student may lack the critical cultural capital necessary for college success because their parents did not attend college. So it just really opens up the broad range of what first gen is and just really showcases a lot of that intersectional nuances and challenges that we have within navigating sort of that experience. So what I want to do here, this is our agenda, what we're going to go through. The first section is going to be on succeeding in college. And then we're going to sort of transition into navigating the recruiting process. From there is going to be succeeding in business. And a fourth is really, what does it mean to advance during COVID? Because I know a lot of people have been asking that. So what I'm going to do here, because I want you all to definitely be able to see our lovely panelists, is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to start jumping into the questions. So for the first one, when it comes to the topic of succeeding in college, I would just love to know from you all, just to really discuss your experience as a first generation college student. Specifically for you, Aparna, what was that adjustment period like for you?
Thanks, Malik. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So I am a first generation student, as we all are in the panel. I said I was an international student. So I was born in Sri Lanka. I was raised in Honduras. And in Honduras, I did all my schooling in one like school. So it was not like separated like middle school, high school, the way it is in the US. What that meant was that my entire graduating class was 60 people. And I had known these 60 people since I was in first grade. I was valedictorian of my high school. I came to the US for undergrad at Trinity on a full ride. I thought I knew what I was doing. So when I got to college, I realized very quickly, well, not as quickly as I should have, but I realized by the end of the first semester that the gap between my high school in Honduras and a US university was very, very great. I lacked very basic skills. I didn't know how to organize my time. I had lived with my parents my entire life, and it was very like structured. We came home from school. We weren't like, my parents were very strict. We did homework right after lunch, and we got an hour of TV, and we couldn't hang out with friends unless it was like an extracurricular activity. So coming into the US, I was so excited that my parents weren't like watching over me, and all I wanted to do was hang out with everybody. So that meant that it took me probably till my sophomore year to really get a sense of like, okay, so I go to my classes, I have to make my own calendar in terms of like when I do my homework, study for the tests. I can no longer study the night before because that's not good enough anymore. And I had to learn how to study because I was not challenged before in my high school. So what I ended up doing was that I like asked classmates, my roommates, people in my hall, like what were their study techniques. But it was definitely a hard like adjustment. My first GPA, I think, was like a 2.9. And it took my entire college career to bring that up just because I was like dealing with all these adjustments that came with being a new college student, new to the US system. But I learned a lot from it. And a lot of the skills that I had to learn back when I came into the US are still things that I use at work.
Awesome. No, thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people can resonate with that story of like, there is just such an adjustment period from high school to college that you really have to sort of navigate yourself. I would love to kick it off to Eric too, to really touch on his experiences and sort of maybe speak on like, what challenges did you face and like, what steps did you take to succeed in college?
Hi, everyone. I think really good question. So I think we talk about, which I think Malik said is intersectionality, right? So you're first generation, but you also might be something else. So we heard of another student who's first generation American. We hear another student who, you know, I might identify as African American. You might be transgender. There's a lot of different things that could affect your experience as a first gen student. So for me, I came from a lower income family, and it was tough, right? So my parents started a business. My FAFSA was as low as could be, as many of you may be able to relate. And I just remember, so I went to the George Washington University, which is, I'd say, a relatively affluent school. And I mean, the challenges I faced was, you know, not many other students had to go to the financial aid office on a Thursday night and cry to ask for more aid, to have enough grants to, you know, to eat or not be able to get out, you know, not be able to have to drop out of school. Not many other students were worried about making sure their work study had enough money to have their, you know, to have their job so they could pay for their books. I think every person here, and I think everyone who's attending has a different experience. I think recognizing that we all come from different backgrounds, we have different challenges, and it contributes to who we are as a person in general. Yeah, I mean, that's just one experience I had that was tougher. And maybe another student, English might have been their first language as an international student. There could be so many different experiences that can make it more challenging for you as a first gen student or a student from a different background. But I think the fact is that, actually, I was listening to Michelle Obama's speech to first gen students from 2017, by the way, just getting some inspiration for this chat. And one thing she said is that the admission committee decided to accept you. Like, you are there for a reason. You are there because you deserve to be there. Every person here who gets a job at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Bain, no matter where you are, you got that job because you deserve to be there. And I think that's just very important to remember.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that was just amazing. It really talks about like kind of what you mentioned. We got there for a reason, you know, it's like you were accepted, and don't ever undermine sort of your value and your worth, because you know, that is something to really hold on to and to really acknowledge and to live in the moment for. So thank you for sharing that story.
And if I
Um,
can add one thing to that, I would say the key thing to tie both of the stories together too is in these universities, there are always study hours, there are always outlets and opportunities. Please take advantage of that because I think as first gen students, right, there's a lot of programs that their school may offer or study hours. Take advantage of that because networking and getting to know people will come into handy for job opportunities and also references later on down the line. So definitely take advantage of the things that your campus offer outside of just the schooling as well.
Yeah, no, definitely thank you for touching on that. And honestly, I think that's an amazing segue in this topic of taking advantage of things, of moving on to our second mission, really, of just really navigating the recruiting process. Because I know a lot of students are just worried about, okay, how do you really go about looking for opportunities, or how did you all sort of go about really landing your first internship job or landing your full-time job? Like, what does that look like? What does that entail? So I think I definitely want to kick it off to Eric really quickly. Again, just what initially inspired you to pursue a career in business? And if at all, like how did your family and our background play into that decision?
Um, Good question, I think, and I think actually, hopefully, my answer doesn't relate to many people, but I think it will. I didn't have money growing up. A job at Goldman Sachs sounded very attractive to me in terms of the things I wanted in the life I wanted to live. I had student loans to pay off. I had now I have a child, my dog Ziggy, so he needs food to eat. So yeah, like I think listen, I would have loved to be a TikTok influencer or to go work in social justice, but I went to Goldman Sachs, I went to finance because I knew the income that's associated with that job. And I think, listen, I think that means that we as first gen students, we as students from different backgrounds and diverse communities have a drive that many people don't have. And I think the questions the other panelists will go forward, but one thing that we should remember is you have something in common with me, you have something in common with every panelist here, is that we come from a different background. I've already seen a few requests on LinkedIn to connect, and I love it. And I look forward to getting to know you guys. I think one thing is that it's very special that we come from such unique backgrounds, and your story is something I think we can relate on. And I think you'll find throughout the panel that many of us share experiences in common, and I think that's why you developed really authentic mentor and mentee relationships.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for talking and touching on that, because I think honestly, even just hearing that really resonated with me personally. Because just even with my first gen status, sometimes I look at a lot of my friends and the opportunities that they pursued. And for me, it was always something with business, because I was also like a first gen low income, and money was always a thing that I was striving for, because I didn't have the privilege to sort of like source other opportunities or to really engage with them. I really had to try to figure out, okay, like how do I support myself? How do I support my family, et cetera. So I know that was always top of mind, and I loved hearing that resonation there. Martel, I think I want to kick it off to you next and just sort of get your take on like, how did you navigate the career search process when you were an undergrad? Sort of what opportunities were you looking for? Sort of what stood out to you, et cetera.
So it was a couple things. One, it was definitely using the Career Center. Like when I started, I volunteered at the Career Center, and I would always see how the older students would come in and get resume writing, get interview skills, be able to find job outlets. So I definitely used the Career Center because that was able to see what was out there to really hone in on what I really ultimately wanted to do. Secondly was I thought about the various organizations that we had, be it particularly for me, it was National Association of Black Accountants, NABA. So I would go to the NABA conferences, I would get participating there because I would always see that they would have different companies coming there that were offering jobs or internships. So definitely using those programs. But then how I finally kind of honed in on what I wanted to do, it was ultimately going to a place where I can be authentically me, but still grow. And looking for a place that was in East Coast, because I always felt like the East Coast. I went to boarding school at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, and I really loved the idea of being on the East Coast because it seemed, particularly from an African-American experience, it seemed very free, and I can always make a lot of money and still do what I wanted to do, versus coming from the Midwest, it seemed a little bit more restrictive. So for me, it was definitely money, somewhere where I can authentically be myself, as well as on the East Coast, because it seemed to be, hey, we can make money and stand in New York. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So it was definitely that challenge, because I love challenges. But definitely using the resources such as the Career Center, organizations such as NABA, or different things, and definitely going to the career fair, because you'll be surprised as a freshman, you go into the career fair and you constantly go there. By senior year, there's like, oh, I remember you from your freshman year, and that helps advance you a little bit more as well. So that's what I will answer to that question.
No, totally awesome. And I love that you touched on that idea of authenticity, right? I think that's one of the main general things that we're trying to structure around the O4U conference, is really trying to empower our students to leverage their true selves. And what does that look like to bring that to work? You know, and it's like, how do you go about finding places where you feel like you can truly be your most authentic self? So I love that you were able to touch on how you sort of were making a decision within your career search process of what makes me feel the most authentic? What is that location? What is that job? Sort of all of those questions. And so now I definitely want to go to Aparna just to get a little bit more about, like, what advice do you have for students who might have very few role models in life? Because I know that while we're up here talking about authenticity, some people may not necessarily know the best ways of going about it themselves. Like, so how do they really find people to really like help them out on this journey, both career-wise and authenticity-wise?
So when I came into college, I didn't know the difference between an MD and a PhD. I remember my parents asking, are your professors all doctors? Like, I was like, they have a PhD in their name, so it's not a medical doctor, so I'm not sure what they are. It says Doctor of Philosophy on Google. So that's where I started. Like, I had all, like, as a first generation student, like, I had 3 career options: engineer, doctor, or lawyer. Those were the things my parents knew. So I came in as a pre-med, and anybody can tell you, as an international student, you should not be a pre-med because it's not going to go well. But around junior year, I started realizing that all the professors were telling me not to do it for a very good reason. So I found myself not knowing what to do, who to ask. I didn't even know that I needed a role model because I never had one. I didn't know it was things that people had. So my advisor, I got very lucky with my college advisor, who was kind of like giving up on me a little, but also like, okay, like throwing me a bone. And he said, you know, there's this global health conference. Why don't you come and sit in? Maybe public health is something that interests you. So I went to this conference, and the speaker happened to be, like, I didn't know who she was. Like, I just showed up like after my class with my backpack. I didn't dress up for it, but she was like in this military uniform, and she was talking about like US like health aid, in like international health aid. And then one person stands up and says, I don't understand why America has to give like money to all these international countries. They can do fine by themselves. And I looked around, and I was the only international student in the room, or international person in the room. So I stood up and gave an answer of, and I remember this very clearly, I gave an answer of, you know what, like, when bad things happen to us, we really don't wait for America to save us. We try to do what we can, but you need to understand that our resources are limited, and we appreciate the help from wherever it comes. But you need to know that we are also like people with dignity, and we try to help ourselves before you come in to the rescue. And the speaker just like stared at me. And that night I received an email from my advisor saying, look at this email from Allison Rosewood. And I was like, what? And it said, who is that girl who looks Indian but has a Hispanic accent? I need her to work for me. And that was like the story. That was my first role model. She happened to be a senior analyst at the Office of the Secretary of Health and Human Services in DC. And she was the one who introduced me to public health. And through her, I got an internship job in El Paso. She wrote me a recommendation to Yale for the School of Public Health. And that's where it all started. But it was because one advisor gave me a ticket to a conference, and I decided to speak up for my people in the middle of like a crowd of people who thought to misinterpret like our intentions. So that's a long story, but really what I'm trying to say is you have to find your own role models. And sometimes you get lucky like I did. And other times, you know, like over the years, I've shown up at like professors who I admire. I show up at their office hours. I keep in touch. That advisor, I still call him for his birthday 10 years later. You have to make your own opportunities happen. And that's the best I can tell you, because there are other students like legacy students who come in with all these connections. Their parents are donors to schools. So like the deans know them, but that's not the situation for us. We make our own luck. We make our own opportunities happen.
And if I can add a little bit to Aparna's, what she stated, what advice I would give is look at where you want to be and look at the skill sets. Because with me, I always thought about what was the end goal that I had and really building that. So one of my mentors was a 5th grade teacher, and I deal in business, so we have to drink wine and we have to go to fancy dinners, which I never went to. And on my 21st birthday, she took me to a winery and sat down and taught me how to drink wine, how to taste wine, how to sit at a table, which came into handy later in life. So I say your role model may not be in what your career is. Just think of the skill sets and the traits that your career is giving, and look about the people amongst you that can give and guide you, because it's not always people that is doing your career that can give you gems or give you advice for your career success. So keep that in mind as well.
I'm not trying to jump into this as well, but I'll add one comment too. I remember, so I got an offer from JP Morgan, BAML, and Goldman when I was a sophomore in college. I had never felt prouder of myself. My family was proud of me, everything. And I remember going back to my parents and asking, like, where do I accept my offer from? JP, Goldman. Of course, I accepted Goldman, and I'm very proud of it. My mom was like, why would you go to Goldman? It's a terrible bank. There are no ATMs. I've never seen a branch anywhere. Who banks with Goldman and who are they? And I'm like, Mom, like, I don't know. Like so that was the thing is, you know, maybe that's why you need mentors, because maybe, for example, my parents are the biggest hustlers I've ever met in the entire world. Like I am who I am because of what they've accomplished and who they are. But on the other hand, like they didn't know what the best bank was. You know, they didn't even know JP Morgan was JP Morgan Chase. But with that being said, you know, I went to other mentors and they helped. But, you know, Goldman didn't target my parents because of the background we were from. But the value I added to Goldman is exceptional, and they chose me for a reason. But I think this is just another example of like why you need diverse mentors. And even Martel saying how his 5th grade teacher taught him how to drink wine. Like everybody adds value in different ways, and having a diverse set of mentors is really important. Sorry, I know you didn't ask for 3 panelists to jump in, but
I love all the insights here, and I think it just really shows you the power of like having such a diverse cohort. And we were even able to hear some of that same message from our esteemed keynote speaker yesterday. Their name was Audrey. And it was just an amazing keynote, which they talked about like how you should be open and receptive to mentors and role models that will come from anywhere, like all walks of life, because that's really how you can take a little bit from this person, a little bit from that person, and really all bring it together to give you such a broad wealth of insight that one person probably just couldn't give you. You know, it's like, it's really about sourcing it from different places, different people, etc. So I definitely resonate with all of what you all had to say, and I think it's such a valuable insight. So love that everyone was able to chime in on it. And even, again, just more so on this vein of suggestions to students, Martel, I would love if you could sort of just provide a few suggestions on how students can actually leverage their first-gen status like during the interview process. So I know we can tap into role models, but what does it look like actually during it? Like how can a student actually take their first-gen status and like use it to their advantage in an interview?
Right, I think when you think about when you're interviewing and you think about companies, the first thing you need to think about is company's culture, right? Take a step back and say, what is this company culture? What are they promoting in the marketplace, in the atmosphere to say if their business is driving when it comes to the people that they employ? And then really search back into your life, your journeys, your characters, and highlight those things. And I say that in particular because I work for Ernst & Young. And Ernst & Young is really big on entrepreneurship. So with entrepreneurship, it comes, you have to be creative, you have to be hardworking, you have to be sacrificing, and you have to be able to understand and pick up without necessarily having all the skill sets. So what does that mean? So when I interviewed and I told the story about my grandma and how I would see my grandma every morning work as a nurse and go from 6 in the morning till 11 p.m. and still make sure I had dinner, still make sure she had a smile on her face. And that drove me to be able to do a lot when it comes to school. So getting into clubs and being a leader and driving that while still maintaining a 3.8 GPA. So when I was able to have an interview and the individual that I interviewed, I just told him the story of how my grandma inspired me. And that to him showed him all the skills that will take someone to be successful in a consulting business where you have to learn on your feet, you have to build relationships, and you have to really be able to tap into creating and satisfying your audience. And by telling him the story of my grandma and how she inspired me, and that really helped. So I say all that to say, really from a first gen, really think about all of the peripherals. It's not necessarily about school because you got the interview because of your schooling. Now they're looking at who can I be on my team and what value you can add. And trust and believe, I'll even tell a story quickly on when we was in a proposal and we had practice for 3 days. And I always remember my mom and my grandma said, be thankful, be humble. And we didn't practice this, but at the end of the proposal, I took my seat back and I shook everyone's hand and I said, thank you, I look forward to working with you. And obviously when you're practicing, everyone has to do the same thing. So the whole team did the same thing. And ultimately later on down the line, we won that work ultimately because we all thanked, and that was something no other firm did. And why did that do? Because as a first gen, I've always been told, be humble, be grateful for the opportunities you get. So just remember those little things that you learn and the one things that make you you, because those are the value adds that the others or individuals that are not first generation may not be more appreciative of. So that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah. No, totally. I love that response. And I think it really does touch on just kind of like what you said, more of the softer skills or things like that that you do learn from your upbringing that can really just make the world of difference in a business setting, interview setting that can really help you stand out amongst competition. So don't look at it as a deterrent. Sometimes look at it as an advantage. Like it really can be if you leverage it in the right way. So I know we spend most of this time here talking about sort of the college experience that you all had and sort of the process to getting your actual jobs. But now I want to look post-college and then post-graduation and where you are sort of in your life today and how does that sort of speak to your first gen status as a college student. So the main question here is like, I just want all of you to really describe your experience navigating the workplace, sort of what challenges did you face when you first entered? What challenges are you currently facing? And even if you can speak to like some strategies, et cetera, but we'd love for you all to just really touch on what it looks like being a first gen post-grad and your experience navigating that so far. So Aparna, I want to kick it off to you first to
Sure.
sort of.
Thank you. I think when I first entered into consulting, I was very intimidated. And it was not so much anything that anybody else did, but I suffer a lot from imposter syndrome. It's when I go into a room, I look around and I don't feel like I belong. And it's nothing that anybody else is doing, but it's that insecurity in me, because remembering how unprepared I was for college, that stayed with me. So in terms, like the biggest challenge I faced is feeling like I don't belong. But as I like kept reminding myself, like what Eric said, like they chose you. They thought you were good enough. They reviewed applications and they thought you were good enough to be at this job. So it's just for me putting one foot in front of the other. I was like, okay, I need to do this task and I need to do this presentation. And because I suffer from imposter syndrome so much, I always go above and beyond. Like I always double check my work. I always do the extra analysis. I will always volunteer to do the extra thing, like whether it's going to a recruiting conference, whether it's like putting together the binder and all these extra things made people think of me as dependable and resourceful and determined. And those are not things that I set out to do. I was just trying to tell myself, it's going to be okay. You're not going to get fired. You're good enough. But all these things that like I have in me, because I'm a first-gen student, that I always feel like I need to prove to others that I belong somewhere, made others perceive me as a strong worker, as a strong employee. And I see people like nodding their heads. And I'm assuming it's not just me that suffers from imposter syndrome and goes above and beyond to like make sure that people think I belong there. But really, that's what it comes down to. And in terms of like what strategies I help to succeed, I stay organized. The other thing about me is that I have ADHD. I'm diagnosed and I take medication for it. I have for the last 10 years. But that means that I acknowledge that that's a disability I have. So I learned over time to be confident about it. And when my managers start telling me like a new thing, I'm like, okay, I understand like 20% of what you're saying, but next time, can you email me the background information before so I can read it, comprehend it, and then like listen to you? Because when you throw new stuff at me, it's very hard for me to keep everything in my mind because my mind races a lot. So it's been a combination of like showing my worth, but also like once I feel that people believe in me, asking them to help me succeed.
That's awesome. And honestly, I'm up here taking notes on that too, because I love this idea that, I mean, I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome a little bit, but it's just like really understanding and like bringing your true self and all the lessons again that we've learned. So love that. That's amazing. Eric, would you like to sort of give your background take on how it has been for you post college and sort of if you are currently facing any challenges, strategies, etc.?
Yeah, you might hear my dog whining in the background. He recently got the snip, so he's in a cone right now, and he's very unhappy about that. So apologies. Okay, I wanted to add in a complete honest transparency, right? So I'm first gen, I'm lower income, but I'm very lucky also that I have the privilege of being a white male. I'm gay, which within our community gets a lot, has a lot of privilege. I always felt the imposter syndrome, but I can't imagine what someone from a more diverse background felt until I moved to Dubai. I live in the Middle East. I'm gay, I'm Jewish, and I love to drink. 3 things that don't happen here. I'm sorry, Ziggy is attacking me with his cone. Please ignore. But like, I've never felt more out of place. Imagine walking into a room, like my hair is bleach blonde. There's a person in local garbs speaking Arabic with my boss who prays 5 times a day, has never drank a drop of alcohol in his life, who's a devout Muslim, and I'm in the room. Like I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt. I'm the biggest difference you could ever imagine here in the Middle East. But I've learned that like people love people who celebrate their differences. First of all, and then secondly, sorry, dog. Secondly, I think your story and your hustle is amazing. So, you know, when my boss didn't hire me here in the Middle East. I was hired by someone else who got reassigned to Hong Kong. And this MD was like, who is this guy from the US? The first week we sat down and I shared my story. I told him about being first gen. I told him about the hustle I have, how, you know, I want a good bonus at the end of the year because money is important to me. And he immediately respected who I am. He respected my motivation to be at work. I mean, I have some colleagues who come from unimaginable wealth, multimillionaires and work with me just because of the wealth that they came from locally within the Middle East. I'm relied upon, like Aparna said, I'm the person that they find to be dependable because they know that for me, this is not a game. I can't afford to lose. You know, if I lose my job, like no one else is helping my family. If I lose my job, Ziggy over here is not eating. Like there's no bets, no losses, no pass. No, I don't pass go again and collect $200.
There's no safety
like
net.
Exactly, if we lose, we're out. And I think if you have the right person, the right manager, they will respect that. Yeah, that's all I'd say.
I love that. And yes, the hustle is 100% real.
And just to add to that, like what you said about being a white male, I've lived in different places in the US and like El Paso, San Antonio, New Haven, DC, and every place I go feels like a different country. So and not every place I go celebrates my differences. So some people can't see the past, like me being an immigrant. I've had Ubers in California kick me out because I'm an H-1B immigrant taking their job. That's happened. Their app malfunctioned and I was dropped off 3 or 4 times in the side of the road. But what people will respect always, I've found, despite the color of my skin, despite my sex, despite my sexual preferences, whatever it is, my immigrant status, they respect hard work. And if you show that you're determined, you show that you're willing to do good, honest work to earn your money and your place, everywhere I've gone, people have been able to see past my physical appearance and respect the hard work.
Love that. No, completely love that. Martel, I don't know if you have an input here, want to sort of give your take on the post-grad experience?
Yeah, I think the challenge was all of what everyone said, but the challenge was raising your hand and saying, I need help, right? So with the imposter syndrome, you have, hey, I want to work hard and I want to show that I can add value, but then sometimes you lose focus on asking for help. And I say, just take a look at your jobs, particularly my job. We don't get to where we need to without the help of others. So really not being uncomfortable with raising your hand and asking for help, because actually that imposter syndrome where you want to be there, you want to show value, because ultimately value matters, right? But you have to ask for help, because that can also look at negatively if you don't, right? So that was a challenge for me, was really finding out when was the right time, or being comfortable with saying, hey, I need help, and not feeling like that's going to push me back further. But yeah, to tie it together, a lot of what the team say here today, I think the message I would say, storytelling, right? Storytelling is key, because once a person knows your story, they know a little bit about you. So now they can give you a little bit second glance than if they don't know your story. So take every moment you have to really highlight your story and your journey, because in each story is a skill and a lesson you've learned that's making you a benefit to the bottom line of your organization.
No, absolutely. And thank you. Because I love that idea of balancing both, right? Hard work, but then also having sort of the self-awareness to know when it's okay to ask for help. We can't always do it on our own. And sometimes we really do need to sort of ask for assistance, and that's okay. It is not a bad thing to ever ask for help. It is never a bad thing to lean on people. But then you can also still be very strong-minded, strong-willed, and very determined in that process. So definitely love that balance. The last sort of thing, and I want to transition to it real quick so we have enough time for students to really ask questions, is really advancing during COVID. I think that's the last sort of step here, because a lot of students, they're navigating a home personal situation, and now also trying to go to work, but then also still do schoolwork, et cetera, and things can maybe feel a little bit more difficult. So I would just love, and just very general here, what advice would you all give to students who have to navigate challenging home situations while still pursuing their degree? And are there just any resources or tips that you can share to make sure students stay competitive during these times? So Martel, I'm gonna start backwards here and start with you first to see if you can sort of shed any light on those.
Yep. I would say the one thing is stay connected, right? A reach out, a hello, a how are you doing to your mentors, to your friends, to your professors. Just you want to stay top of mind, right? Because in COVID, there's a lot of things that are going on. You don't want to be excessive. So just touching base and following up and saying hello is one thing. And also for me, I was talking to someone yesterday, and I just think always, I never look at things in short term. I look at things in long term, 5-year periods, and know your journey and do everything purposeful. And just keep checking in with what you ultimately want to be in that 5-year period, and just make sure everything is moving purposely. Be it you're going to the gym and you're working out because you purposely want to be somewhere. So just finding that. And then for me, an outlet for just mental health and just finding a way to just stay sane when we are contained is I love music and I like poetry. So what I do is I walk and I listen to music. But just to me, just stay connected. It's okay to just send a note to say hello, because I think if you stay top of mind, you never know when that opportunity is, oh, I need this help. And then you just send the email checking in and you have that skill set. So that's an opportunity. So just staying welcome, and then always tell me your story. What's going on? How are you doing? Because you never know where your help can come from, is what I would say.
Awesome, awesome. Eric, do you have any sort of insight there on what students can be doing during this time to really stay competitive and really just help navigate their current situations?
So I would say adapt. So I remember when I was recruiting, because the world's not the same. It's not, and anybody who tells you it is lying. My life is so different. So when I was recruiting, when I met someone and I wanted to network, right? When they would give me their business card, I would take their business card, and at the end of our conversation, I would write notes in the back. So has dog named Ziggy. Grandmother is like Martell. Grandmother is a rock star. We love her. Like whatever interesting fact they told, their story, who they are. Like just write something so you remember, because you're gonna forget. So same thing. I don't have business cards anymore. So I know this sounds lame, but I created an Excel spreadsheet, personal and professional. Professional is mentors, people in different companies. It has times that I need to reach out to them. It has when their birthdays are. It has connecting. And same thing on personal. Like I haven't spoken to my cousin in 6 months, I realized. And I need, like, I used to see people in person. I used to have the business cards. I used to have all this world, but now, how do you adapt in the new world we are? Additionally, I mean, my family and I was supposed to go see them. We did our Passover Seder via Zoom. Like you got to change your life a little bit. And it's shocking. It's scary. I mean, to be honest, for my friends in the US, when we were locked down here in Dubai, I didn't leave my studio apartment for 3 weeks. I wasn't allowed to go take my dog out. So meaning my dog pooped on the floor every day. If you want to talk about depression, I hated my life. I was extremely depressed. It was tough. You think a cramped apartment in New York was tough. It was 110 degrees here. But what I realized is that, we had to adapt. So instead of going to Barry's boot camp, I did Barry's at home. I changed my life in general. And again, I just think being adaptable is important. And I think whether that applies to school, whether that applies to work, whether it applies to, the work personal life you're going to have, I think being adaptable is important.
Awesome, awesome. And last but not least, Aparna, would love any sort of advice or lasting takeaways that you can impart on students really navigating this time.
So I can't imagine what it's like for you guys, but the closest I can think of is I took a semester off from school. The reason is for another panel, but I took a semester off from school and my family situation was not great. I grew up with domestic violence and all of a sudden I was dealing with my own stuff, mental health issues, and I was at home where my father was abusing my mother and I was still supposed to recover. And I remember trying to think like, oh my God, like my classmates are getting like internships and I am like out of the recruiting cycle. I'm here in Honduras, I don't know what to do. And what I did was I tried to gain experience with what I had. I was interested at the time in like pre-med stuff. So I found that my pediatrician was like helping the local clinical trial center. So I asked him if I could like help him with paperwork. So I went in the afternoon and I like did like closed his paperwork out and like did medical like information entry. And I also like signed up for a class at the medical school. And I found that the local morgue needed an assistant and I like was an assistant to the mortician there. And I realized that, well, and I know like now that I'm not a pre-med, this all sounds really gross, but at the time I was really into it. But I realized that you can't make these opportunities happen because these require in-person interactions. But I've been eyeing a lot of volunteer opportunities you can do online. I like contact tracing through Johns Hopkins. Like that's a big thing that my classmates and I are doing. There's ways you can still gain experience that are relevant to what you're doing in a virtual setting. And that's my advice. Like at a time I thought I was getting set back because I wasn't able to get out and like be at college and with my classmates and do the hustle thing. I made my own opportunities because I didn't know what else to do, but I couldn't afford to be set back. Like I knew I didn't want to go back to Honduras and be in a house where my parents were fighting all the time. So I made my own opportunities happen. And that's like, you got to make your own luck, I guess is my like parting advice.
No, I completely resonate with it. And I think that's an amazing thing. We have now concluded our session. And I know that I wanted to save some time for Q&A, but unfortunately we're a little bit over time. So I want to at least put up on here everyone's contact information and just to say thank you, because all the wisdom that you all were able to impart on students, and even just for me, like having this frank conversation with you all, like it's just been such an amazing thing, and it's enlightening to hear from your perspective. Just ways that we can truly just leverage our first gen status and really leverage who we are as people and not look at it as like a deterrent again, or look at it as an impediment. Like we can be empowered in how we are and our upbringing and just really understand like how to navigate this process. So thank you again all for really taking the time out to talk to our students. It's been an amazing session. So yeah, and for all of the students, please feel free. I know I took up a little bit of your time, but in the next 5 minutes, we will be hearing from our last keynote. But thank you again to all our panelists for taking it.
By the way, I just want to add one thing. I am a point scholar.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for you guys to hear from George. Be excited. He's an incredible man. Yeah, that's all I had to jump in, just say that. But thank you. Thank you again. But Point Foundation is amazing. And if anyone here hasn't heard of it or wants to apply, also happy to help on that side. But the Point Foundation changed my life. Amazing organization.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you all again. It was amazing, and enjoy the rest of your days. Bye all.